well, I came across ADRC. And I almost debated, should I go in? I might run into Terry at Brown County ADRC, but I debated against it. It would have been too much. Ultimately, the ADRCs, the reason I clicked that picture is I think ADRCs are the backbone of the whole aging network and the system in the States. They are the organizations that provide the supports to people who need them the most. And without these supports for older adults, people with disabilities, individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, without these supports, we're not truly embracing inclusiveness. Even as we were walking in today into this ADRC, I had two of those coffee cartons. Stephanie had a bag and she had something else in her hand, and we were like, how are we going to open the door? Wait a second, we're at an ADRC. We can just tap that button there and we can enter. So the point of it all is working in the aging and disability field makes the whole world a better place to live in, not just for them, but for everyone. And I'm proud to be working in this community.
Terry, I didn't mean to mess with your mouse, but Terry raised her hand. Do you want to see if she has a question?
Yeah, darn tootin'. How could you be that close and not walk in the doors? I mean, seriously, Kunal, you were like right there. We have the best cafe in the world. I mean, why wouldn't you just swing in and say hello?
Wasn't that like the most perfect Wisconsin? Are you darn tootin'?
Well, I do love Green Bay, so I might be there again very soon.
Yeah. Just don't tell us about it, right?
So
they do have
for
an
today,
amazing coffee cafe, by the way.
they do, the Grounded Cafe.
Yes.
That's on my list for next time. For today, I want to talk about three things. The first is the collective impact you have all had in the state of Wisconsin with supporting caregivers. And I know Carrie right at the back, she's going to be very interested in the first section. I'm going to provide all of these numbers in an Excel format to you later on.
Thank you.
The second is promoting self-identification. This was one of my key areas of focus in my master's over the last year, and there's a few things that I want to talk to you about, get your insights, get your opinions and everything. And the last is updates on Trualta. We're constantly trying to improve the platform and do better and serve more caregivers and do it in an efficient way. So I want to talk about what we've been up to. The collective impact. So this is kind of a busy slide. Let me break it down for you. So over the last 3 years, we have had multiple avenues of marketing and promotion. Some of us have done print marketing, like flyers and postcards being handed out to caregivers. We've done a lot of social media marketing. We've done targeted digital ad campaigns for caregivers, and we've identified caregivers like that. Those have resulted in 928 caregivers electively going onto the platform and creating an account for themselves so that they can access the lessons and the modules on Trualta. Also, about 1,100 caregivers have been invited to the platform. Now, this is all you. All of you have collectively sent about 1,100 invitations to caregivers. Out of those, 400 registered and the rest did not, which is always going to be the case when the caregivers are not registering immediately. What they're saying, their no does not mean never, it just means not right now. I have a million other things on my plate, and that is fair. As of right now, well, as of 4 to 5 days ago, we have about 1,400 caregivers registered on the platform. But the bigger insight or the takeaway here is that we have identified about 2,000 caregivers in the state, caregivers who would benefit from education, from training, and all of the resources that we would be able to provide to them. So that's kind of an applause moment for the whole state of Wisconsin. Yay. Yeah. Thank you. out of those 1,400 caregivers, this is where, the funnel was going a little narrow, and beyond this, the funnel broadens out. Out of those 1,400 caregivers, about 50% of those tried a new skill. Well, 61%, but 50% viewed between 1 to 10 modules on the platform. This is what we like to call these caregivers are exploring on the platform. They're looking for content. They're really testing out what is available and what would be helpful. Now, 11% viewed more than 10 plus modules. So they're basically adopting the full platform. They're really engaging with the content and they're doing all that they can. Out of those, out of the 1,400 caregivers, about 820 plus dedicated searches have happened on the platform. Does anyone want to guess what are the most common things caregivers search for on the platform? That is one of those. That is number 4 on the list.
Oh.
Yeah.
No? Okay, it's not number 1.
Self-care. That is ironically not high up on the list. We wish it would be because they do need to take that time for themselves and they do need to prioritize themselves, but they're not doing that. Anyone else?
How to care for their loved one, care issues like bathing and things like.
Yes. It's related to the first one. The first most commonly searched key term is communication. And it's very interesting to see that there's so many caregivers who struggle with communicating effectively with their loved one, especially because with dementia, the person that they know or as they know them might start to fade away and they have to be okay with it. So the communication gap is the number 1 thing that they're searching for. The second most common one, I got to look up my notes. Yes, the second and third most common one, the stress and burnout. Again, all of that kind of re-emphasizes our hypothesis that caregivers are going onto the platform when there is an imminent need, right? When the battery is getting down to a very low percentage, if they did look for self-care and they did replenish their energy every now and then, they probably would not get to a point of extreme stress and burnout. So all of that to say is we really need to do better in terms of supporting caregivers on an ongoing basis, not only when they're extremely stressed or burnt out. And when I say that, I also mean that we need to just let caregivers know that there's a lot more available than crisis resources on the platform. 11% of the caregivers logged in 5+ times. You'll see that there's a commonality. 11% of caregivers viewed way too many modules. 11% logged in 5+ times. Are they the same? Most likely. The returning caregivers is where the most value is demonstrated. They see that this helps them, they see it benefits them, and they come back for more resources. Now, some features on the platform are really new. How many of you have checked out the community chat room on the platform? Also, everyone on the online, on the Teams.
Watch the webinar after they've been recorded, but I haven't been on the Teams.
No, so I mean the people who are joining in via Teams. If you have seen the community chat room, please let us know. Okay. Awesome.
Not recently, so I think there's been more activity probably since.
There's been a lot of back and forth. Think of a throwback to your early 2000s discussion forum that now exists on the Trualta platform. The caregivers not only find education and training modules, they also find access to social connections with other caregivers. And these caregivers could be all across the whole country. They're able to post different things on the community chat room. They can ask questions, they can respond to others, they're notified when someone responds to them, they can follow topics, all of those kinds of things. Now, it has 2 main benefits. One of those is it encourages peer support and peer learning. And the second is it's an asynchronous way to reduce social isolation or improve connectedness. Uh, on the Wisconsin platform, there's been about 150 discussion posts, comments, and back and forth of caregivers. Caregivers are really looking to engage with one another, and that does not come as a surprise. But this is like a safe space for them to feel accepted, to feel like their experiences are valid, and just be with someone who understands what they're going through. Also, 11%, this is a different 11% segment, they've joined live support groups and webinars as well. Over the last year, since February, we've had the Connections program going on the Wisconsin platform. It's it was a pilot program initially, and we wanted to see, well, do people really use it? Are they interested in it? So we had live support groups. Caregivers are able to join support groups over a period of 4 weeks. They're hosted once weekly, and they're matched with other caregivers in similar situations. And we saw phenomenal success. About everyone said, yeah, I would come back to it. I would recommend this to someone else as well. We saw really good success there. And also the webinars. With webinars, we have a care educator on the team. Her name is Monique. She basically, I'm sure, has a Facebook fan page of her own. Caregivers seem to love her, and she's able to get to provide tips to caregivers. How would you manage your stress? How would you communicate with your loved ones? The most recent webinar was about exercise and movement. So essentially what she did was she showed caregivers how to do some exercises so that is good for their own mental health. It was going to go a little over time. So she said, okay, well, it's an hour. I'm not going to keep you guys. We're going to wrap it up. And everyone unanimously was like, keep going. We're okay with it. If you have the time, we have the time. And that is the kind of response we're seeing. And about 11% caregivers have also engaged with these live features. We've not really broadcast them too much. We've not really advertised them a lot yet. But I think because of the success we've seen, we would want to emphasize a lot more of that. So this is the impact we've seen. What do you guys think of that?
Question,
Yes.
what other states is Trualta in?
So we're in about 32 states. Stephanie just reminded me of that.
And how does Wisconsin compare? I know other states might have been longer, shorter and everything, but how do we compare with our engagement?
Extremely well. It's one of our top 4 platforms. The other platforms, again, they're not all platforms are statewide. Some of those are in local AAA regions. Some of them are in rural areas in Alabama. Some of those are in very modern areas like New York. So we have to standardize based on the different parameters that we're comparing. But even with that standardization, Wisconsin engagement is really good. When we say that caregivers have spent about, let's say, an hour on the platform, it is an incredible thing to say because each lesson is about 2 to 5 minutes long. So if you do think about it, they've probably received at least 12 different modules, and they've learned all of those skills in that time.
No, this is Terry. Could you go back and tell me how, I admit I was on the Trualta site and I was looking for my own thing. Where can we access this class you were just talking about? How do we find out those classes have been scheduled or to make them available to our caregivers?
Great question. So when you go onto the platform, you see on the top ribbon, there's a community section. The third option on the header is a community. When you click on it, there's the community chat room you see on that list, which talks about the discussions and comments. And then there's also caregiver support groups and webinars option right there, where you see a full calendar of different support groups and webinars that are available to caregivers.
I'm missing something. I see dashboard, learning, library, community, local resources, caregiver view.
The third one, the community one.
Oh, webinars and support groups. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fairly new, so we're trying to test out. Do people really like it? And we've been positively and overwhelmingly reassured about that. So I'm really happy about the response we've received.
Two questions.
Yes.
So I know there's some marketing materials that we have access to. Are there items that are specific for the community?
Also, very good question. Our director of marketing, we've passed that feedback on to him because we do recognize that different caregivers would have different motivations. As a caregiver, I might be interested in, planning for the future, looking at education and training modules. Someone else would be more interested in just connecting with others and feeling included. So we should have marketing materials that speak to both, that emphasize the value to all different kinds of caregivers. So we're working on that, and we should have that, I'm going to say in a week or two, but do not cite me on that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Just to know it's forthcoming. And then second question, can you remind me, what were the top 3 searches? It was communication, stress and burnout. What was the other one?
Communication, stress, and burnout. Yes.
I see. Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
So it is kind of sad that caregivers wait until the very end when they feel like there's no other option to look for resources, which is the notion we want to change. And I've got a section today on promoting self-identification that goes into that in a little more detail. Yes.
There's a lot of people that won't admit burnout though to others. And I can see this happening when they're willing to do it in the quietness of their own self and the computer.
That makes
And I think that it's really important that that information is available to them because a lot of them will not come and admit it to any of us sitting here.
100%. Which is,
They're supposed to be able to do it all. They're the caregiver.
yep, it's the pressure that is imposed on a caregiver from society. It's the natural expectation or something. I 100% agree with that.
Just gonna say it's because you really don't know that you're the caregiver until you're well into caregiving.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. I wish the idea of caregiving was not so stigmatized and it wasn't so like, oh, let's keep it under the wraps. Let's keep all care needs under the wrap. It's natural. We live in a society where we're all legitimately dependent on one another and we have these relationships of vulnerability. I wish it was not the case, but it's just me. Oh, well, actually, all of us. Okay, we're going to talk a little more about the engagement patterns. On the last slide, we saw how many caregivers are engaging, how many caregivers are doing different things. On this slide, I want to go a little more into the numbers. Out of the 1,410, we have 856 engaged caregivers. They're really logging in, looking at the information, they're searching for things, they're bookmarking stuff, all of that, all of those kinds of things. Now, on an average, the learning journey of engaged caregivers is about 127 days long. Something that I would want to add there is 127 days yet, because the learning journey has not stopped. If there's another imminent need, they would still log on to the platform. But on an average, so far, we've seen that there's about 127 days between the first time they sign up and the last time they've logged in yet. So it's reassuring that caregivers do keep this top of mind. And we want to do a lot better too as a company to keep sending, friendly reminders, nudges that don't want to disturb you, but just letting you know, you still have access to these new things, the new content, the webinars and stuff like that. There's about 6,800 content views, which is, again, a big feat for us. On an average, every caregiver would have seen about 5 modules, which in and of itself is good because each lesson begins with distinct learning objectives. Interestingly, the 80-20 rule, that is our founder Jonathan's favorite rule. 20%, the top 20% engaged caregivers accounted for 82% of the total views. So once a caregiver sees that this is benefiting me, they do go into more content and more details and seek more training. It's kind of, although not the same, if I was to look for an equivalent, think of a YouTube spiral or an Instagram reel doom scrolling thing. You're looking at something, you're engaged, you find it entertaining, and you keep going into more detail and more detail and more detail. With caregivers, it's something actually useful. With the top viewed content, big shout out to Bryn and Lynn for having curated the caregiver resources in Wisconsin, because that is the highest viewed content on the platform. Yes, they're looking for education and training, but they certainly want access to local resources, supports, programs, all of that, something that can help them immediately. And that should not come as a surprise to any of us. Instant gratification, we're built on that. We're wired to look for that. There's also Introduction to Aging and Dementia, which is the second most viewed content, and then Caregiver Guilt. I wish people did not feel guilty. I wish people knew that they are doing the most they can, that they're doing the best they can with the limited resources that they have on hand. And that is why we really want them to go to support groups. As an individual, I would be very likely to tell someone else, you're doing so well, you're doing so much, and you're doing the best you can. When it comes to self-talk, I would be like, oh my God, are you serious? We could have done that a lot differently, which probably is going to happen on the car ride to Minnesota. I'll be like, Stephanie, did I really say that? But the point is, with support groups, we would be able to manage these negative feelings that caregivers are so predisposed to have. I'm going to pause there. Any reactions, comments, feedback?
No, it's Terry again. I'm sorry. I put 2 comments in the chat. You know, you talked about stress and burnout are the top 2. Is there any way, I've been taught to dream the impossible, right? So is there any way that as they explore those 2 topics, they can be directed to self-care? Do you know what I'm saying? Or can you make that magic happen?
That magic is happening as we speak. So when someone looks at the Caregiver Guild module, at the bottom of the page, there's a cue for them, find other resources in, and that includes caregiver wellness. So we're channeling them from Caregiver Guild, like gradually into more of, let's talk about caregiver wellness, and this is where you'll find more resources. I do love that section. I agree. It's yes, we are seeing that there is this negative self-appraisal that's happening, and we identify that, and we want to move away from that, and we want to help you. We want to usher you away from that. Okay, what is the second comment?
Oh, it was just something to share with the caregivers. One of the recent quotes I came across that I've been sharing with my caregivers is accepting help doesn't have to mean giving up control. I recognize that a lot of our caregivers, nobody can care for so-and-so like I can. And this has really resonated with a bunch of my caregivers. So I just thought I'd share it.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on that?
That's great.
It is, Terry. I don't know if you can hear that, but everyone is in agreement. That is a great quote. All right. Now, this is kind of for all of you. This is staff shout outs. Like, you guys are doing such a wonderful job. Over the last 3, maybe 4 years, 1,100 caregiver invitations have been accepted. I'm not talking about how many invitations were sent, how many invitations have been accepted. 1,945 content recommendations have been sent out. So a little more context on the recommendations. Trualta is built on an algorithm. So, if as a caregiver, you're looking at a certain type of content, if you have selected a few topics, we will be able to send you automated recommendations. If you've selected agitation and aggression as a topic of interest, we can recommend lessons like communication and dementia to you. But it's an algorithm. You guys are humans, I'm assuming. So you're able to build that one-on-one connection with caregivers, and you're able to pick up nuances and cues about their caregiving journey that a computer or an algorithm will never be able to pick up. And you've been using those to send out content recommendations to caregivers, which has been very impactful because a caregiver who receives personalized recommendations is 1.7 times more likely to log in again, 1.5 times more likely to engage with the content. So whether you know it or not, you have been responsible for all of the amazing numbers that we've been seeing today. The caregivers who have been invited to the platform, as opposed to the ones who self-register, again, are 2.2 times more likely to engage with the content. So again, this is where you guys applaud yourselves and each other. Yes, thank you. On the right side of the screen, you'll see some shout outs. Margaret, you've sent about 411 recommendations. That is amazing. That is incredible. Followed very closely by Jacqueline Williams. Are you on the call today?
Jackie's not, but she's with La Crosse County.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then Walworth County is right there. The only reason I wanted to give shout outs is you guys have been doing a phenomenal job. And we have been receiving or seeing results because of this. So this is an open question to everyone. Can you share what has worked for you or what challenges or barriers you faced to operationalize Trualta at your ADRC or county or organization?
Looking at this question and I have a question to add to it. So it's virtual and people would need access to a computer. So are you aware of what other communities have done to kind of help people who don't necessarily have those type of resources?
That's a very good question. So off late, on the platform, well, since for a long time actually, you will be able to download all PDFs on the platform itself. So let's say there's the lesson on communication and dementia. You can just click on download to print, and you'll be given a choice whether you want to download it in English or Spanish, and you can download and send it to the caregiver. Either via email or snail mail, you can hand it to them. And that has worked really, really well. As an example, there's this caregiver in an interview, this came up in an interview. He said, I don't have access to internet at home, but I go to my friend's place and I print out these lessons. I take them home and put them in a binder. So essentially, he has created a whole library or collection of lessons for himself. And we've seen that the offline support really helps them.
Are you implementing any other languages besides English and Spanish? Are you working on that?
As of right now, it's English and Spanish. The Spanish language, having the whole platform in Spanish took us about a year and a half. So we're just a little, we're catching our breath right now.
Okay. Out of curiosity though, is there a language preference? It's always interesting for us.
I was thinking like Hmong, there's a large Hmong population in Wisconsin is what came to mind, but I'm sure there's others.
We also heard interest in Vietnamese in the northeastern side of the country.
I can offer too that folks who might not be able to have access to technology at home, or maybe they're not comfortable typing in their email, and they're, worried about getting spam or who's gonna have it. I have heard, in caregiver support groups in particular, sometimes it can be difficult to come up with topics or people aren't talking, kind of having an idea of what to talk about at the next caregiver support group is helpful, gets people going. But that could be a good place to just go over one of the modules. You can play it audio or read through it together. And then that spurs a lot of conversation, because I think at most they're like maybe 5 minutes, some are only 3.5. So it doesn't take up a lot of time, but it starts a conversation. You have walking away material with it. And then it typically makes sense that once you're in one module, you're following up with the next, in sequence. So it gives you material for caregiver support group meetings without, as the facilitator, having the pressure of what are we going to talk about next? Or one person might be kind of, taking a lot of the conversation or air out of the room, and kind of splits it up a little bit and new folks start to talk. So I've heard some positive feedback on that.
I've had caregivers that don't have the capability at home, and I've offered they could come and sit on my computer and watch the program, and that's what I've done. Or I had another computer set in another room and they went and watched it in another room. So that's how I met that.
We've had the ability to purchase some iPads.
Okay.
And then we just give those iPads out, and lots of times the caregiver is a child watching a parent or so forth. And they've been able, we just downloaded the icon onto the iPad, so then it's very easy for them to find.
That's a very helpful suggestion. I did not know that you could, save a browser to your homepage on iPad. That was news to me about 6 months ago, and I was like, really, you could do that? Thank you for sharing that. I see you had your hand up.
I did. Being so new, part of the training is this, like, don't forget to offer Trualta. So as a caregiver specialist, can you, in your own words, tell me what's the best way to talk about this so they because they're so overwhelmed with everything they're doing, taking in so much information. I want to be able to make sense of them by saying, this is what Trualta is. What do you think is the easiest way so they get it?
Very good question. Here's a recommendation. So if you have your computer or your iPad or your phone in front of you when you're talking to the caregiver, you can ask them just like one open-ended question. What is the biggest caregiving challenge you're having right now? Let's say they say something like, my loved one keeps repeating things, and you can just type that into the search bar on the platform. It will give you a lesson that's relevant to that topic, and you could show that to the caregiver. That is one of the quickest and the most immediate ways to build faith and buy-in into the whole program.
Right.
Because they would see for themselves, they have a challenge and you solved it.
Here's the answer.
Exactly, here's a list of suggestions and recommendations for the caregiver to solve that problem.
Yeah.
So it's solution oriented, it's skills based, and it helps them, it reinforces faith.
That's a really good point, because families, like we had five people in our family caring for my mom. It would be also good for them to share it with their siblings, that same page or wherever, because they're all facing the same problem. But I like that, how you stated that would be an easy way to get them introduced to some education right away, because they walk away with, a pile of brochures and all this stuff, and then you're like, okay, and then Trualta, they're like, oh, okay, whenever I get to it,
100%. Also, with multiple caregivers to the same person, as you described, there's always a chance, it doesn't happen always, but there's always a chance that there's different opinions. There's different ways in which different people would like to care for the loved one.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few lessons on there about sibling dynamics or family dynamics. And I would even recommend looking at those things.
You ever thought about having a portal so families can talk to each other through Trualta?
That's a very good idea.
Because we had siblings all over the country, and, one sibling in Oregon is saying, oh, I never saw that in mom. And the one down by mom saw it, and the one living with mom knew it. So it would be, discussing doctors, and nobody's in the same cities anymore, but it would be neat if they could have a platform and within the platform that they could talk to each other.
That is a very interesting concept. We'll be sure to pass it to our product team. Unfortunately, I don't get to pull those strings. So
Could like tag each other if they knew, because do you get a username when you like to participate in the community say, or?
yes,
You do, okay.
You, as a matter of fact, do. When you're participating in the chat room, you just set up a username that, and the system will tell you if it's taken or not, and then you can participate and even I think you can tag others, but
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah. Because if so, that'd be a way to do it, kind of.
I was wondering a little bit about the content. How do you develop the content on there? Make sure it's staying up to date, and who builds that? Is it research vetted? How does it make its way onto there? And are you updating it? Because you know, when it sits around for a while, maybe it's not the most up-to-date information. So how do you stay on top of all of that? Because it's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content. I agree. We have a whole department of content and research, and they're collecting feedback from caregivers, from clients such as yourself. And based on what you tell us, we put that into like a pipeline. One of our learning managers does the analysis of, okay, is there really interest in this? And they have their methods, and they do multiple interviews and test out the concepts. And once it's validated, it goes into development, design, and then it goes on to the platform. And there's also constant QA and QC happening so that we're able to make sure that the information is relevant. It's still relevant and it's still up to date. Things like vaccinations for COVID-19. We had those modules put up on the platform, I feel like end of 2020 or early 2021 when they did come out. And then over time, that information changed. The eligibility changed and where you could get them changed. So we had to kind of update it. And eventually we removed it or phased it out because now it's entirely different. So we have a team that's very vigilantly looking out for these kinds of ideas and also quality assurance. And of course, we have the team that creates the content is a team of occupational therapists, nurses, physiotherapists, and then it's co-created with caregivers. Caregivers always have a voice in how it's created and what is being shown to other caregivers.
Have an app yet?
We don't have an app yet,
Okay.
but as they mentioned, we can pin it to the iPad or your phone.
Sure.
You had a question.
No, I was just gonna say, one of the things that I do is I'll take, and I use some of the modules or the articles within the modules, and I highlight in our newsletter. I'll print them out and then we'll put them in there, and of course we get the credit to Trualta and stuff, but that's one of the things that I do. And then I do, because I have two different newsletters that I'm writing, and the other one I like what's new in Trualta, and I'll highlight what's the new modules and stuff like that, just to kind of remind people that, oh yeah, this is out there, but it also gives people a written that they may not have the access to the internet. They at least have,
Absolutely.
and so maybe it piques their interest a little bit, so.
So you can also actually use these slides itself because there's the third section is on updates on Trualta. You can just use them as is if you wish.
Yep.
It almost behoove us to have our own account in.
What's that?
We have our own by logging in through that.
Yes.
So that gives us same access. every time.
Exactly. You actually have access above the caregivers as well. You not only have access to what all they have, but also you can invite your own caregivers and recommend content to them. So, yes.
I kind of have a question for everybody here and online. Do you have in your ADRCs, like a station where people can look up things in Trualta? I think like you're out here you're coming for a class or at your senior center or something like that, like a place where it's just like always there, ready to go. So even if people are just having a cup of coffee, wasting time, does anybody do that? It's just kind of like another resource instead of a rack of brochures. You would have a computer that's kind of.
But I love that. Across the lobby, we call it the Knowledge Nook with
Not the name.
2 or 4 computers available for public use. And so that would be an awesome
Right, if
idea.
they use it for everything, I mean, it could either be queued up or you could have like very easy. Or you say if you can have that little icon there that they can go to,
Absolutely.
it's one of the things that are on the.
And what's also cool, I've listed like 20 ideas already, but upstairs we have an actual computer lab room. And there are probably 20, computers in there. And so we do have some high school students come over once in a while to do like technology 101 kind of training. And that too would be a cool class to offer.
I love that. It's such a good way to build intergenerational solidarity.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of similarly, in Milwaukee County, our senior centers have a Tech Connect program where you get training on technology. So I had suggested really a whole caregiver course as the content that they're learning. It could be emailing your loved ones, doing chat, but then also Trualta and all the other virtual support. So yeah, I think it's a great avenue for people to learn technology on its own.
Right. I love all of the ideas.
Well, one of the things that I've done too is we've taken the emergency planning for caregiver.
Yes.
And stuff, and I actually do an hour-long training on that. We print off that book and we have different opportunities where people, and I go through it with people. So then it gives them an idea of, oh yeah, there's this company and it was on the front
Absolutely.
and stuff, and how can you access this and stuff like that. So I do that. I've been doing it almost one time a month.
Yeah, it's becoming very popular and not just for
Amazing.
caregivers because it's something, just generally gets you thinking about planning for emergencies, having a backup plan. She incorporates like powers of attorney and, things like that. But yeah.
Life planning.
Life plan,
Yes.
right, life planning.
Exactly. It's basically an hour long and, we go through it and I've had one place ask me to come back because they wanted more. It was actually a senior or like a low income housing. And they asked, because not everybody got to attend, they wanted me to come back. So I have another one scheduled.
Amazing. On that tangent, we also have on your staff space, you'll see there's a Get Essentials workbook. And that is, again, something that's very usable, something caregivers can act upon right away. It's like one lesson on asserting yourself and asking for help, and then creating a caregiving plan. And then it also has a plug to Trualta. So if you like this content, there's a lot more where this is coming from. So ask the person who gave this to you so that you can create your account. So it's, yes.
There's a hand raised by Margaret and there's a couple challenges or one challenge response in the chat.
There's the challenge that is carving out time to review the content so I can make appropriate recommendations. I hear you, Terry. Our content team is working at light speed. So a lot of times I need to act consciously schedule time to take a look at what's new. What I would recommend is if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll get all of those updates condensed into an email. So that would be very helpful. And then following up with those who have asked to be connected but haven't utilized it yet. I hear you. Margaret has her hand up. I'm gonna pivot to Margaret. And can you tell us a little more about the challenge too that Terry has mentioned?
Okay, so if they don't have their own computer, when I meet with them and do their first home visits and complete a needs assessment, which I found very helpful, whether or not they're getting grants, it still gets me to know them and what their needs are. If they don't have a computer, I can print something for them. And also, if they want more, I will bring my computer to them and we can set something up then. Otherwise, they just let me know that they need information and then I can find it and get it over to them. And then when they do the Tech Connect and get their own laptop, they can do it themselves then. We also, when we have our combined DCS and family caregiver support group, we start with a little informational or educational segment in the beginning. And we try to give information from different sources, and my input is always something from Trualta. And then I have my flyers there with the registration information, and always bring my laptop to help register people.
Thank you for your championship. I love that. So I find it incredibly difficult to navigate.
Two screens?
Yes, yes, pretty much.
Sorry, I'm taking control of your mouse too.
Oh, no,
every
you're
now and
good.
then, just
You're
to make
good.
sure we're not ignoring folks in virtual plan.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Yes.
keeping an eye. Thinking out loud, these are just some things that all of you have tried and described in different permutations and combinations. Setting up a Trualta workstation at your local library, literally you're reading my mind. Or local library or a senior center or an ADRC would be a very good idea to keep this top of mind. There's also putting in a postcard in any packets that are delivered to caregivers, be it Meals on Wheels, just as an example, any other things that they receive that are like tangible would be a good way to remind them. If you guys are on social media, if you guys have the ADRC Facebook page or anything like that, tweet it. Well, on a Facebook page, you can't tweet, but posting about it.
What do they call it now?
X.com. I don't.
They call it Xing or?
I don't want to get into that, but posting it on the socials would be very helpful. I know that I did not think that through. And I would really suggest that it does. Using the lessons as a follow-up item or like even on your support groups would be very helpful. And then looping in local healthcare providers or facilities. This is a very long shot. If it works, it works. All right. So we're talking about promoting self-identification. One of the reasons I want to talk about self-identification is why is it even important that caregivers assume the role, they adopt the title of being a caregiver? A lot of times people may think, oh, I'm just being a good son or a good wife or a good husband, and I'm just taking care of someone who's family. I'm not a caregiver. And it's there's the obvious dichotomy there. So why is it important that I really want to talk about this? Are you guys all familiar with the trans-theoretical model of behavior change? In very short, what we are expecting caregivers to do is change their behavior a little bit so that they're able to take care of themselves and they're able to take care of their loved ones in some different way so that they can age in place. Ultimately, it's better health outcomes for everyone. But in order for us to encourage them to change their behaviors, they need to go through a spectrum of cognitive changes. The first is pre-contemplation. It is like, I'm not a caregiver. I am just being a good son, wife, husband, etc. Then comes contemplation. They would be like, oh, maybe I'm a caregiver. Maybe I should reach out to the ADRC and look for resources, but what good is that going to do anyway? Then comes preparation. They're like, okay, I am a caregiver. These are the resources available. I'm going to plan it out. I'm going to plan to use them, but I don't think it's going to work because everything is stacked against me. They're still preparing, but they have the negative connotation of the outcomes. Then comes action. They look at the resources, they use them, they change the behavior slightly. It benefits them. When they do self-care, they're able to see, oh, I feel better. I talked to my friend over the phone for 5 minutes and I feel better. I had a nourishing meal and I feel more energetic. They see the benefits and it reinforces the self-efficacy. So that is when the magic starts happening, and that is when they really believe in the value of the resources available to them. And anything beyond that is a maintenance phase, which means that any new challenge that comes on, the caregiver would be able to keep the mind cool and calm and collected, and they'll be able to deal with those challenges. For all of these steps to happen, the first or the bottleneck step is pre-contemplation. We need the caregivers to at least acknowledge that they are a caregiver, that there's help available, that they would be able to feel so much better if they use these resources. And that is why, in my opinion, it is extremely important that caregivers do adopt that title of a caregiver. What are the disparities in caregiving? This is such a loaded question. If you do not stop me in 2 minutes, I can go on for the full day on this. The first one is cultural. As I'm Canadian, but I'm also Indian. I was born and brought up in India. In South Asian or ethnic cultures, there's nothing like a caregiver. It's being a good adult son. And of course, I'm going to take care of my parents. There's no two minds about it. Of course, there's no doubt about the fact that there's an ever renewing cycle of caregiving duties and responsibilities. And those negative impacts of caregiving are also passed down generation to generation, which is why it's so important that we have a more inclusive approach to providing caregiving resources to everyone possible. Gender. Take a look around, everyone. Take a look around. What do we see?
Women.
Yes, 80% of those who provide care to someone else or those who adopt the title of a caregiver are females. Males, for a multitude of variety of reasons, refrain from accepting that title because at times it is perceived as harmful or detrimental to the masculinity. And this is not coming from me, this is coming from research. So we also have to be mindful about how we represent males as caregivers in the interventions that we do. And there's socioeconomic. If I can afford it, I could really just hire a home health worker or an in-house worker 24/7 so that I don't have to do the caregiving responsibilities. I don't have to continue doing those. But unfortunately, that is not the reality for most people. So what I'm trying to say is there's so many different gaps that exist in the caregiving world, which again deter people from saying, yes, I'm a caregiver and I'm proud of it and I need help. Some of the promoters and motivators of caregiving. If what you guys are doing is very helpful. You're telling caregivers, you're doing the best you can. You know what? There's more help available. That's motivation, that encouragement or the reinforcement is so helpful for caregivers. It's way more beneficial than you can ever begin to imagine it. Thank you for all that you do. There's also social support. If I'm in a support group, if I see someone else is going through similar things, similar challenges, I'm more likely to believe that yes, there's it's okay for me to just say it out loud that I'm a caregiver. What are your thoughts around this? Yes.
Real quick, the first one where you write, why is it important that caregivers should adopt the title of caregiver? I agree with that. But what comes with that is the loss of their own life as they know it. They struggle with letting go of what they're doing in their daily life. They have to take on this new role, which is basically putting their life aside. And it's really the biggest hurdle. They become exhausted mentally and emotionally right away because they can't do the things they used to do. So now they're depressed. So that's a really big one. It's really coming down to the loss of their own normal life.
Absolutely. It's the denial of it. As my mother taught me, like when I was growing up, don't have an ostrich-like mentality. What I used to do is I just pretend the problem does not exist and then hope that it does not exist. But that I cannot have that ostrich mentality.
A client right now that had 2 strokes, the care recipient, 2 strokes, and the wife her life is just at a standstill.
Mm-hmm.
She totally has to give up what she knows and does, and now is having to take care of her husband who can't. So that is a huge reality for them.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think I want to piggyback on that. I think the work of Pauline Boss is really helpful when it comes to caregivers. I don't know if you've studied her work, where to teach people to hold 2 juxtaposing ideas in their mind, right? I can be both things because identity formation theory is I can't change who I am to this person because my identity is tied up in being his wife. How can I be his caregiver? So her work says, teach them to say, I can be both this and that. And I think that's really helpful to try to work with caregivers to parrot that over and over again, because that's hard for people to change the idea of who they are, because their very identity is tied into being the wife or being the daughter. So her work
I
kind of
haven't
says,
thought
let's
that.
be both, you can be both things. And being able to hold both thoughts in your mind at the same time. That's the transition. That's her premise anyway of the work she does.
Can you repeat her name?
Pauline Boss, BOSS. Have
Thank you.
studied her work?
I have not, but this is very,
She does stuff with
helpful.
dementia caregiving, and she was a caregiver for her spouse, but she's a researcher who kind of does presentations around the country. It's
nice. I'll definitely look her up. Maybe also send her a LinkedIn request.
Yeah.
Also-
get her out, be her best friend.
Also, I think that identity dichotomy might be magnified for adult children caregivers. It's almost like I'm taking care of my parent, but I'm having to be their
I'm the
parent.
parent now.
Exactly. So I feel like that is a lot more exacerbated in that scenario.
And people do not like being identified as a caregiver from the research. They don't like that term. So if you can call it anything but that, then they'll be okay with it.
Tell me more about that.
That is true.
What terms would you recommend? Because we're trying to experiment with terminology and caregiver, care partner. It's a reluctance that is so strong to adopting that identity.
I think it's almost like the same premise as when you're trying to talk about a person with disabilities, you put the person
The person
who has disabilities. I think you're the wife who provides care. I think sticking with that notion, because people do not like that title. They get downright hostile if you try to call them a caregiver.
Absolutely.
And that's what
One
the
of the-
research shows too.
One of the things that is soften the language around caregiving entirely. It is almost like those you provide care for. And when we're talking to the care recipients, those that provide care to you, so that it's more verb oriented than noun oriented. And I think that has legs, and we're gonna find some success there.
I think that's the route.
It's an ongoing experiment.
It's all tied, it's all tied into the identity formation theories.
Absolutely.
Like, this is a life in the making. I'm 40, 50 years this person's daughter. And so I think, or wife or whatever. So to say you're a wife who provides care, a daughter or son provides care, I think that's probably the
Totally.
least intimidating or.
Yeah.
I just would be careful about as everything changes and everything, I lost my husband at 49 from a terminal illness. And I'm a caregiver for my mother in her home, and she's 86. I'm a fairly young caregiver. So, be careful, because I don't take caregiving, I wear it as an honor badge.
Mhm.
I'm very proud that I can be a caregiver, and I don't disdain the word. So I'm sure there are many that do. And just be careful not to disengage that a caregiver word is not.
Absolutely. It's just expanding the idea of the people that we want to help.
Right.
Without alienating anyone.
Right.
And just really trying to have big wide open arms and embracing everyone.
Right.
So
Inclusive.
exactly. Inclusiveness is so important.
As that caregiver is the trusted person, which is the highest
Yep.
form
I
you
agree.
could potentially have in your home. So
I agree. So I work in the caregiving space. I have been for the last 4 years, and I lost my grandmother this year. And I did not really do much except maybe call her every week or provide emotional support and so on and so forth. And I never thought that I was a long distance caregiver. And that just made me think, am I the hypocrite myself, but it's a lot of different feelings and everything. So I agree. It is the highest badge of honor that you're the trusted person for someone else, but also it's so many emotions going on all at once.
Sorry for your loss.
That kind of brings to mind another point too, is like when, if you accept the title of caregiver, I think sometimes people feel alone, like I just said, I'm the primary caregiver, when there can be a whole bunch of people, or people who don't
Absolutely.
do things all that often, and they especially don't want to be called the caregiver because they're not there doing the hands-on every day. They just come in and help every once in a while to try to get
Long
that.
distance caregiver.
Yeah,
You're
just trying to get out,
Yeah.
to
I'm the
recognize.
Yeah.
My family.
So,
I
Then you
myself
can get those services too.
okay.
So I fill in for my sister when she needs respite. I go down and I do my part-time work.
But do you think she's the caregiver or are you?
We both are.
Okay, we'll see.
But it's just a joke of mine.
Right.
Yeah.
My caregivers, when I talk, I said, I'm sorry, you all are full-time, you take care of your loved one every day. I'm just the part-time that just goes in to give my sister that respite. I always just, and that, they look at it, oh yeah, I can see where I could have a sibling come in and help me on that part-time base, and it's not part-time per se, but that's 24/7.
All
My sister.
contributions help.
Right.
And on the platform, now in the self-registration flow, we have an option for caregivers to self-select, I'm the primary caregiver or I'm not the primary caregiver. And again, what we're trying to do is expand the idea of who we're trying to help, regardless of whether you provide care once every day or once every year, you deserve resources and you deserve to feel connected and supported.
Takes a village.
It does take a village.
It does.
It absolutely does. I was, funny story, not even lying. I was at the New York airport and I was reading this book and the world around me started to blur because the story was so emotionally engaging. And I realized I'm crying and the story ended and the world unblurred and I'm like, did I just get emotional in the middle of so many people and get that? But this was the story of a woman who was providing care to her husband who was going through cancer. And she describes that feeling as telescoping. It's as if at any given time, my vision flips between the short and the long end of the telescope. My eyes are either trained on the distance, what life is going to be like after he eventually passes away, and what's in front of me. There's a constant clash of conflicting urges. And this is the most powerful statement that I've read. It describes caregiving, the constant, as you mentioned, the identity crisis. Do I prioritize myself or my loved one? Do I feel guilty for prioritizing myself over someone else? And it's all of those conflicting urges. Yes.
That made me think about the sandwich generation.
Yes.
I mean, you're adding another component. Your kids mean the world to you and are important, and nothing is slowing down for them. You still have to maintain that energy, for them, and then you're a
Absolutely.
caregiver, so then you're really putting yourself third, or,
100%. I really recommend reading this book. This is such a derogatory statement, and I hated it when I saw it, but the book is beautiful. I highly recommend it. Okay, so how can Trualta help with promotion of self-identification of caregivers? As you were talking about this, we now have this caregiver identity flyer. I wish this was a little clearer, but what we are trying to do is not tell them you're a caregiver and you need help, but we're trying to be like, are you maybe helping someone with their housework? Are you providing emotional companionship to someone? And we're trying to encourage them to see for themselves whether they're doing the caregiving tasks and duties and so on and so forth. And if they are, there's help available. Now, this flyer is going to be added to your staff space. So this can be downloaded and you can use this new flyer instead of the other ones, because I think that this would really help with self-identification. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry, yeah, when I was working on the presentation, I was working on a 32-inch screen. I was like right in front of it. So I was like, this is big enough.
Is it available for social media too?
Yeah, so this is the first step in this series of caregiver identity marketing assets. I'm sure the director of marketing will be working on social posts and everything as well. Because again, we do want to be inclusive. We don't want to we don't want to be prescriptive that you're a caregiver. We want to ask, are you a caregiver?
Love how Trualta is like the first step for people or can be that, you know, they're not gonna come to us at the ADRC necessarily because they're in that pre-contemplative or whatever, you know. And this is a way to get them on that platform and then eventually maybe connect with us or, you know, other resources in the community. So I think this is a great campaign.
Thank you. It really is meant to be served as a gateway into a whole lot of other connection and support services. And then there's live events and webinars. So as you see on your platform, when you go to the community tab, you'll see the caregiver support groups and webinars all listed in one place. Caregivers can select between either dementia-focused ones or general support groups where they can chat about anything that's important to them. Or there's also an option to have office hours. The terminology is TBD. We don't want to call them office hours. We want to call them Ask Monique Anything. And that is where they can ask care-related questions to our care educator and they can receive answers in real time. Why this is helpful is this is a way for caregivers to have a safe space where they can feel seen, heard, and accepted for all that they're doing. There's this beautiful quote, and I think that was just very impactful. Like Thursday is my support group. That's my highlight of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday might be terrible, but I know when Thursday is coming in, it'll all be better after that. I really believe in our support groups. Any thoughts before we move on to the last section of the presentation?
Virtual,
Yes, thank you.
just in case there's chat or.
So I know that I see that the food's here. So I'll try to make this quick for Brent's sake.
I'm hungry.
I just have one thought because I don't know if this wasn't really said, but I think you may or may not know this, but Trualta is available to everybody in the state of Wisconsin, not just our family. It started out kind of like in the family caregiver support programs. But if you're a DCS or now managing the ILSP program, that's the pilot for independent support. I mean, anybody can use this as promotion. Anybody can sign up for it. You don't have to go through our programs even, just put it on your ADRC website. People can sign up and use it. So I just want to make sure that that's clear in case there are some new people on who didn't know that or the new ILSP folks. Please promote this with the families.
Thank you. You know what? That reminded me when Leland was talking about the fact that informal care is a little derogatory to the people who provide, or like grandparents supporting grandchildren. Something that is a good alternative is unpaid caregivers, because nothing that they do about providing care is informal. It's just they're not paid. But Trualta is available for paid caregivers too. Okay, so something that is very new as of maybe last week is Kidney Care 101 on the platform. We have recently expanded into caregivers who are providing care to someone with a cardiac event or COPD, and kidney care is a good natural extension of all of that. Some of the problems that caregivers voiced to us was they are unsure about the disease progression, how it impacts the care recipient, what are the lifestyle changes to be made, what are the dietary restrictions, especially because a lot of times dietary restrictions with heart health and kidney health can be conflicting. So it is confusing information for the caregivers. They could be overwhelmed by medication management, and ultimately it leads to a feeling of helplessness. So as solutions, we have this Kidney Care 101 toolkit. There's 3 sections on it. There's kidney disease basics, treatment and management, and diet and nutrition. All of those help caregivers build those skills and understand those concepts so that it's clearer to them. It also helps build out the relationship with the healthcare provider so that they can ask those questions to them. There's a tool on there, like a PDF that they can download and print to track the medications, also guide for common tests, and to stay more active in the care. Ultimately, the caregivers would be essential to advocate for the loved one in case the loved one cannot do so for themselves. There's diet and nutrition guidelines and also practical tips for common symptoms. Imagine if we all went to the ER every time we had pain. The ERs would be filled. The benefits of this, there's more confidence with symptom management. They feel more supported with an overview of everything. They would feel less stressed and also encouraged to remain on top of it. To show you some screenshots, this is what it looks like. There's a medication list that I was talking about. And also there's this interactive scenario that helps caregivers do meal planning specifically for kidney disease. There's so many resources on dietary restrictions for kidney disease available online, but there's very minimal stuff that helps them build those skills in a low stakes environment that they can use immediately. Okay, that is number 1. Number 2, we have an all new homepage. This was launched again last week. We heard from caregivers that they were often confused about what the homepage is, what its purpose is. So we tightened it all up. There's clearer sections, it's more personalized, and also it provides the caregiver exactly what they need. On the new homepage, you'll see that the first section is what we call the hero of the homepage. And that is the vision that Trualta has. More better days with Trualta. I know it sounds like more better. That is wrong grammar, but actually it's not. As a caregiver, you might have some good days, you might have some bad days, and we just want to make sure that there's more better days. I feel like I needed to explain that. Also, the next section is we really ask them, what brings you here today? What are you looking for and what are your needs? If you want to connect with other caregivers, we can refer you to the community chat or webinars or care stories. If you're looking to learn about caregiving tips and strategies, we'll be able to refer you to toolkits, articles, and videos. I really wish that the screenshot was a little clearer, but so the purpose of the second section is, again, we want to highlight all offerings for caregivers. Oftentimes, they're even unaware that they have access to the chat room or the webinars, and we want to prevent that from happening. As we scroll down, there's this checklist for caregivers. We were brainstorming about how does a caregiver derive the most value from the platform. And we came up with these 5 things. Read your first activities, select your topics that you're interested in, visit the community chat. You don't even have to engage with it. Just visit it, and you can even read the different discussions, and even that is valuable. Register for an event and complete your first toolkit. If the caregiver does that, we are confident that they will see the benefits, and we'll be helping them to proceed along the continuum of the trans-theoretical model, and they'll be more engaged in the long term. The last section is the care story. Again, we did a lot of caregiver interviews, these beautiful stories of caregiver resilience, overcoming challenges. We want to showcase them on the platform. And that is the purpose of the care stories. So we want to highlight them right there. Any thoughts about this? Any comments?
first section where it says if you're looking for support and you're looking for I like how you point them in two different areas. So I think gives them a little bit more choices of what they're looking for. I think that's kind of nice.
Thank you. Okay. All of Trualta in Spanish. The reason I took a screenshot of the homepage and not an individual lesson is to emphasize that right at the top, there's a toggle for English and Spanish. If you select Spanish, the whole page translates to Spanish. We worked with a team of Spanish-speaking individuals so that it's not, Google translated. It actually makes sense, and it is also culturally competent. Very excited about this because, again, a step in the right direction towards inclusiveness. Do you have a lot of Spanish-speaking caregivers?
Depending on where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, bear with me. We're getting there. My Learning Hub. When you go to the learning library, initially what caregivers saw was they're able to take a look at all of the different topics and all of the different modules on the platform. Now, when they click on Learning Library, they have access to My Learning Hub. And when they go onto it, they're able to see at a glance what are the different things that they have already started. For example, I've already begun reading Healing Caregiver Burnout. So this is a place where I can go and then I can redo that. There's a place for bookmarked. So if I have saved something for later, it would appear under that section. Recommended is you guys are going to be making a lot of use of the recommended because when you recommend content to caregivers, all of that is auto-filled under recommended. So if they want to see at a glance what is going to be important to me, as Bryn thinks of that, they can just go to the recommended section and they can take a look at, review all of those suggestions. And then completed is fairly obvious. They've completed the lesson, they've completed the toolkit that will be populated there. Important because it kind of gamifies the experience. It's motivating for caregivers to get to the end. That's the My Learning Hub. And then I promise this is the last slide. So how many of you before today knew that there's live events happening on the Trualta platform? 1, 2, 3. I'll check the virtual room. Okay.
So thumbs up.
Yes. So not a lot of people are aware that we're doing live events and webinars and community support groups and all of that. As a result of that, we've seen that caregivers, only the ones who are really engaged, who are really digging into the platform, attend those events. We want to change that. We want to get everyone involved in these events, which is why there's a lot of different features that will help promote that. There'll be event FAQs, event previews, so that caregivers can just click on them and see, okay, this is what it's going to be. I can see if that is going to be helpful to me, so I'm going to register for it. Also, a lot of times, people don't realize that this is going to be like an actual human who will be leading the session. So we want to introduce the care educator because, like I said, I'm pretty sure there is a Facebook group that's a fan page for many. And there's also relevant event alerts and notifications. If you have done a toolkit on Caregiver Guild, we would 100% be sending you a notification about a caregiver support group because we think it would be very helpful. Also, there was one more. Yes, we've also heard that caregivers are often anxious that if they go to a support group, they'll be asked to speak at it. They'll be asked to turn their video on, and we don't want that. They can feel free to share as much or as little as they want, and they have no obligation to turn on their camera. They can basically just be there to listen in. And we want to clarify that. So that is all going to be under the FAQ page. All right, thank you.
Kunal, it's Terry, I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so these, I have to say kudos to whoever in the room suggested that they highlight an article in their newsletter and then what's new in Trualta. I'm totally going to start doing that. So thank you for that suggestion. So Kunal, with these live events, how far in advance? Because like I send my monthly newsletter before, like for October, it's going out this week. How far in advance are those live, those live events posted? Like, can I see anything and everything for October now? Can I see anything and everything for November in 2 weeks so I can incorporate that into the newsletter?
I'm 99% sure that there is at least a month of heads up. Or
Cool.
so the events are posted well in advance for the caregivers.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.